hosts and organizers of the workshop, ET Telecom, CEOs from the industry, other representatives and leaders of the telecom ecosystem, friends from the media. At the outset, I'm very glad that this conference is going into its third edition. I did have the opportunity to hear the CEOs speak, and I'm glad that they shared their concerns so openly. And we also heard the CEO of Huawei. Huawei, as we know, is one of the leading companies in the world as far as 5G technology is concerned. I want to make this point up front that in this country, we have to make 5G a national center state priority if we want to get anywhere with 5G. This is not a subject that is only for the telecom ecosystem. It is the entire industry in India which should be demanding 5G. Who is going to be the beneficiary of 5G? In my mind, it is going to be every single industry and service that is looking to improve its productivity. That is one of the biggest challenges facing India today. We need to increase productivity. We have a huge opportunity because across every sector we have underserved and unserved populations. It is not the case that we have even a single sector where we are saturated. If that be the opportunity, and we know that wherever, like the telecom industry, where government actually has not made much investment, but the telecom industry has been able to take connectivity from less than 50 million to more than 1 billion, and has been able to operate so efficiently and still make revenues. If that is the model before us, then the question we have to ask ourselves is, why have we not so far got industry on board the 5G challenge? What will be the key drivers for 5G? Clearly, it's not going to be autonomous vehicles in India. It's not going to be robotic surgery. These are good demonstrations of 5G, but certainly they are not going to be the daily use cases. But IoT, I think here Gopal mentioned, more than the latency, more than the other features of 5G which make it a magnitude, a generation different from other rounds of 3G, 4G that we have had. The fact is that if we want ubiquitous connectivity, and we do want and need ubiquitous connectivity, if we want millions of devices to be connected, and we need millions of devices to be connected to get that productivity increment, then we have to migrate to 5G. Gopal was mentioning that currently 4G can support roughly around 2,000 devices. 5G can support 1 million devices. So you can look at the magnitude of additional capacity that 5G can deliver. Therefore, in India, if we are going to see productivity increases through automation, through process engineering, better logistics, smart cities, Industry 4.0. I think in all these fintech, in all these areas, those industries must demand 5G, because without 5G, India is not going to remain competitive. We know that the competitive edge, or the key to economic and technological dominance, the route will have to be through 5G. And that is why I think it is incumbent upon all of us, whether we are from the media or from the government or people who are in a position to influence thinking, we must convey to the central and the state governments that 5G, the stakes are too high for India not to get 5G. So the first task would be to make sure that it becomes an item that is high up on the political agenda. I think all of us have to see how it is that we can get it right up on top of the political agenda. We know that the global discourse is already, a lot of it is around 5G. But that is primarily on the issue of security. What we have to do is to say that security is one of the concerns which we must address. No doubt it's a very important concern. But the fact is that security can be addressed, and there are enough ways of being able to address security. We have to somehow immediately commence the field trials and get on with the rollout of 5G. I am not saying for a moment that security is a trivial concern. Security is a paramount concern, but what I am saying is that like the 100-odd countries which have already commenced on field trials, globally, there are surely enough mechanisms to address security. And therefore, like the other countries, India must not delay engaging with 5G and ensuring that at least the field trials start without any further delay. I just want to point out that if we were to step back and see what is at stake for India, this is the infrastructure of the future. Because even today, a lot of the data that is flowing is beginning to transform businesses and services. It is a lot of discourse, whether it is economic or social or political, is traveling through the telecom infrastructure. But this is nothing, or it's going to be nothing when we look at the future, because clearly we are heading into a digital future where most of what is interchanged will be data. And it is what we do with data that will actually drive GDP. This is therefore an infrastructure that can clearly either accelerate India's GDP, or if we fall behind, definitely I have no doubt in my mind that we could actually see a deceleration in GDP. Having said that, I just want to also share with you what I see as critical to making sure that India is able to harness 5G in the manner that it should be. I think in the last few months, we have a fairly clear roadmap. There is a broader vision roadmap, but there are also clear roadmaps in terms of what should be done on the regulatory front, what should be done on the spectrum front, what should be done in terms of test beds, what should be done in terms of standards, what should be done in terms of capacity building. And a very, very key aspect also would be the application layer standards and the applications that will ride on it. Therefore, I think we have a fair degree of policy clarity. Now, the question is, how quickly can we actually translate this into operable policies, actions, garner the necessary resources, and actually begin the rollouts? As I mentioned, it is not just the DoT or the Government of India. I think it is time for us to actually reach out to the states and share with them what is at stake for them, because at the end of the day, a lot of these applications will actually be state-level applications. A lot of the sectors which will get profoundly affected will be state-level sectors. Therefore, I think they must be brought on board as active stakeholders. Of course, the OEMs, the academia is already, I think this is probably the first time that all 6 IITs and 2 academic institutions of the stature of the Indian Institute of Science, they are already keenly engaged with what is going on. But I think along with academia, we also need to get the startups on board. And I was very happy to hear Gopal say that they are working with startups. I'm sure that other TSPs, other OEMs are also working with startups. Because there is a lot that startups can contribute. It is not, I think, anybody's case today that we want to engage startups for the sake of startups. We are saying, let us engage with startups because they are capable of bringing significant value proposition into the industry. Because some of India's startups today do have very high level capabilities, and the cost advantages that they can bring to the industry, that is the reason why we need to engage with startups. But while the government and the telecom ecosystem is one part of the pillar, I think the second important pillar is really the other segments of industry. I would imagine that, for example, a CII or a FICCI or any of the industry chambers should actually be in the forefront of wanting to accelerate 5G. Because any industry that delays, that is not geared up for 5G, I think will pay a heavy cost. I would just like to spend a couple of minutes on the challenges, because Gopal very articulately laid out what are the key challenges. And indeed, I think these are the issues we have to collectively work on. First of all, yes, 5G will require a lot of investment going in. And the key question is, where is this investment going to come from? I think government will have to do its bit. As was mentioned by Gopal, one of the first things that the telecom minister did was to take up with the Ministry of Finance the reduction in GST, trying to see how the aggregated input tax credit could be returned to them, a reduction in the USOF. These are all fairly settled views in the telecom ministry. The ministry clearly recognizes that at this point in time, industry needs an enabling policy environment that can help it make the necessary investments. I hope that there will be greater momentum on these issues going forward. And I think certainly both as industry and media, we would need to keep up the pressure on government to ensure that this is done sooner rather than later. On the rights of way, because we would need much more fiber, towers, again, I think probably it is time for government, the central government, to take a slightly more active position, I would say. Because it is not as though rights of way is a subject on which the central government's legislative competence is bridled. There is already enough scope within the Indian Telegraph Act, but I think that will have to be brought home to the states. And of course, the states will also have to be educated on what they are likely to lose out. Because there is always this trade-off between the immediate revenues that they receive through leasing land, either for the towers or for the fiber. But unless there is a much greater effort in educating them, the handicap here is that while everyone clamors for physical infrastructure in government and is willing to invest on physical infrastructure, this paramount invisible infrastructure, which to my mind is probably the most important infrastructure for the future, this is an area where they are unable to really see how important it's going to be for them. So I think we will have to do more work on the rights of way, but I think here central government does have enough powers, and I think probably it would have to utilize those powers more aggressively. On the spectrum, again, clearly the ENV bands, the backhaul spectrum, the DoT is currently engaged in efforts negotiating with the Department of Defense and Space. I fully endorse what Gopal had said. Industry needs fairly large sizes of spectrum. Without that, they will not. So I'll just come to my concluding remarks. I do believe that, as was mentioned by Gopal and by Balesh, I think we are at a stable market structure. And my own personal belief is that we will see the sector coming back to health in the next few months. There will be, I think tariffs are normalizing, and I hope they normalize sooner rather than later, so that the industry will be able to make its plans going forward. The last thing I want to say is that India will have to take a call, in terms of security. I don't think there can be any compromise on security, but I think security is one aspect. There are several dimensions to this. So India will look forward to seeing what is the best bargain that it can get. So whether it is in terms of technology transfer, local manufacturing, working with startups, being more open to Indian IPR coming into the value chain, I think a careful call will have to be taken on all this. I have no doubt that the government and the various ministries will apply themselves to this task. So with these few words, once again, let me commend ET Telecom, because I think today 5G is one of the most important infrastructures that India needs to invest in. Thank you.